I believe that every human interaction holds the potential to change your life. And that's like a big reason why I'm so excited to go into every meeting, because it's like unwrapping a gift. You never know where it's going to take you. And it could just be that you feel like a sense of belonging with that person during that time, or they could open up a door, or you could connect with them 4 years later for a podcast episode. So you just never know where it's going to go. And that's what I love about it. And I think that was something that I wasn't able to put into words back then when I started, but it's something I just recently realized is I think that that potential lies in every single meeting, which is why I'm so excited to wake up and do it every day.
Hey everybody, it is John Santiago here once again for another edition, another episode of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky. And if you are new around here or you haven't listened to a podcast episode before, it is my job here on this show to bring you stories, strategies, experiences firsthand from content creators who are building audiences using video as one of their primary platforms. And this week's guest on the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky is a man with a very ambitious life's mission. Now, Rob Lawless is a creator who's trying to meet 10,000 people one-on-one for an hour each. And since 2015, when Rob began this project, Rob has met more than 4,000 people and has been sharing their stories on his Instagram account, Rob's 10K Friends. Now, the project is rooted in Rob's belief in the importance of community and genuine human connection. He decided to chronicle his adventures on social media as a way to lead others by example. It's Rob's hope that his mission inspires others to reach out to someone new and be more open to building new relationships. And this podcast actually is a result of me being one of Rob's, at this point, again, around 4,000 friends that he's made over the course of the last 6 years of this project. And we touch on that a little bit, but it was a great conversation because I hadn't talked to Rob for a while, and you're going to hear us discuss that. It's been a while since we've gotten to touch base, and you know, it was really great to catch up and just kind of learn what he's been up to lately, and how things have changed. Because when he started this project, he was actually doing strictly photos and relying on text, the caption of the Instagram posts to basically disseminate his message and to push forward this mission of meeting 10,000 people. And in the last year, everything has changed for him because of the pandemic. All of the meetings that he does with everybody was usually in person, and because of the pandemic, he hasn't been able to meet up with people in person for one whole hour. But it's opened up his eyes to doing things differently, and that's what you're going to learn about in this podcast episode, is just some of the things that he's had to pivot to over the last year, the ways that his project has had to change. But one of the things that I think was really fascinating to me, and I think will be very fascinating to all of you as content creators, is how he has generated traction for his project. At this point in time, I believe Rob's page, I'm going to look it up right now, but I'm pretty sure that on Instagram he has around 40,000 followers. 42.8K followers on Instagram. He has around 25,000 followers on TikTok now. But so many people are wondering especially under your content creation journey. Well, how do I get people to pay attention to me? Especially once you're starting out, nobody's really watching your videos if you're on YouTube, or if you're making stuff on Instagram or making stuff on TikTok. People aren't really engaging with with your content. And I think Rob is a shining example of why it's important to focus on the content first. He's got such a compelling mission. It's really like an unfathomable number, trying to spend 10,000 hours total in his life, an hour each with one person one-on-one. And that has a little bit of a wow factor to it. And that leads itself to natural virality, word of mouth virality, right? Like here we are, I'm here on this podcast, I'm having him as a guest on this show because what he's doing is interesting and it's worth talking about. And I think that is something that, every content creator, when you're trying to make stuff, you should take that into account. Is what I'm making something that other people would be willing to share or talk about with their friends, with their families? And you'll learn how that has, again, having that at the core of, his content creator journey, this mission, really. I mean, I would say that comes first before him being a creator, is the mission to actually meet 10,000 people in his life for an hour each. That's driving the whole thing. And it's led him to some really interesting opportunities to promote the project, which then brings more awareness to what he's doing, which then generates more followers for what he's doing, more engagement for what he's doing. It becomes this virtuous cycle because he's been able to promote his project and what he's doing on really big platforms like Ryan Seacrest's radio program, the Kelly Clarkson Show. He's been featured in different news articles, news stories over the last several years. And so I think you're going to find that interesting when he talks about that. That's near the end of the conversation. But again, it was a great conversation. I think there are many things to learn from Rob, not just as a content creator, but just on being a good human being. So before I toss to the interview, I want to remind everybody, if you are enjoying the podcast, please hit the like button. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, Video Husky. If you have not subscribed to us yet, those are ways that you can support the show and help us get in front of more content creators just like you. And if you are listening via audio, if this was shared to you, make sure to subscribe to the podcast as well, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts too. That is another way that you can help out. We like to hear feedback from everybody. So a couple ways that you can support the show. And another thing too, you can also subscribe to our email list and get updates to our content and everything that we are doing there. So I don't want to belabor it here. I want to go ahead and let you hear this interview, this conversation that I had with Rob Lawless. So let's get to it. Rob Lawless, thank you for joining me on this episode of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky. Man, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in person, I think, since the day we actually met. Like, because you and I have kept in contact. I've text you here and there. We've had FaceTime audio calls from time to time, but I feel like this is the first time that I've seen you face to face since we met each other. I think like now it's almost like 4 years ago at Echo Park in Los Angeles.
Yes, it's good to see you too, man. Thank you for having me on the show. And yeah, I was just looking at it. It was August of 2017 was when we first met. So coming up on 4 years, which is crazy because I thought it was 3, but time flies. I can't believe it's already been 4 years.
I know, 4 years. And then you were already 2 years into the project at that point, which was already like a significant amount of time. But now you've been doing this for like more than half a decade, which is crazy. Like, do you ever think about that?
Sometimes, but time flies so quickly now that I don't know, 5 years seems like it just went like that. Like I started, yeah, in November of 2015, and I always feel like I have two anniversaries. So one is November 11th of 2015 is the first person that I met, and July, I think it was like June 26th or 27th of 2016 is when I took the project full time. So I feel like I have my start date and then my full time date, and I'm coming up on 5 years full time this June, which is wild. And then November will be six
Yeah.
years. So it's a journey, but a
Yeah,
fun one.
I know, man. I'm really, we're going to touch on this, you know, in this conversation about the project. And obviously, like, it's interesting because I get to be, I get to be on the side where I get to listen to you versus the last time, you know, when we met the first time, right? Like, you were doing most of the listening, and you know, I want to touch on that. But one thing I want to add here, ironically, one of my most recent guests on the podcast was the guy who I found out about your project from,
Oh, no.
Andrew Hales.
Oh, no way. That's cool.
Yeah. I reached out to Andrew cold, like via email. You know, he had his email listed on his YouTube channel. I also forgot to mention to Andrew that, like, I had met you.
Oh, no.
And so, yeah, I forgot to let him know about that. And so, you know, I reached out to him, and he came on the show, and he was really gracious to, you know, offer his time. But it was really cool to get to meet him, and it's almost like full circle here. It's like I got Andrew on the show, and then now I have Rob on the show as well.
Yeah, that's so funny. I met him, I guess that summer before we met. Yeah, because he was introduced to me through another girl who I had met, who became really good friends with my brother, and like she and her husband became really good friends with my brother and his wife, and they hang out all the time in New York City now. But do you know who Graham Stephan is? He's like a finance YouTuber.
Yes, remember actually a couple months ago I texted you.
Oh yeah,
I texted you. I texted you because I was watching Graham's his podcast on YouTube when they had Andrew on.
okay, yeah,
And they got to a point at the end of the conversation where they had referenced you, and they both didn't know that they had a mutual connection in you.
right.
They both had met you previously.
Yeah, that was wild. I'm glad you texted me because I started to see some people like comment on their posts, and their posts are kind of buried in my page. And I was like, wait, I know someone saw me through something, but I couldn't find out or figure out what it was. And then you texted me and you were like, it's this time in the video. So thank you for doing that. But I forgot that you were the one who told me about that.
Yeah, man. No worries, man. You meet so many people. Like, you're already, you know, I was preparing for this conversation just to see how far you've gotten since, right? Like, I was friend number 1212 at that time.
Nice.
And now you're already like at 4,000. You're almost like 1,000 people or less away from like reaching the halfway mark of this 10,000 people goal that you have for yourself.
Yeah, I have met just over, I guess, 3,000 people since you and I met, and I should hit 5,000 probably this time next year. I usually move at like 800 a year. I think the last year was closer to 900, but yeah, for your listeners, so yeah, I'm doing this mission to spend 1 hour one-on-one with 10,000 different people, and everyone, as you know, was in person before the pandemic, and I met people in Philly, Los Angeles, and then New York City, and Hoboken, New Jersey. But once the pandemic hit, everything was virtual. So everything aside from like 5 people has been virtual over the last year, and it's kind of been nice because it's been like if someone cancels last minute, for example, I'm able to fill that time slot pretty easily, and it's exposed me to people from all over the world. But I do miss meeting people in person. I can't wait to get back to that someday.
Yeah, For sure. And that's something I definitely want to touch base with you on further about like the project and how it shifted over the last year due to the pandemic.
Mm,
But, to set some things up here, and these are certain things that I know, like just from, getting that chance to hang out with you a couple of years ago. And then even writing that article that I wrote about you on my personal
mhm,
website, which we'll include a link to. Um, but I do want to, for the audience and the people who are listening and watching the podcast, give some insight into just your background as a human being, as a person. Um, tell me a little bit more about, tell me something about your upbringing and how you grew up in your family life.
sure. So I am from the suburbs of Philadelphia, and that's what I'm calling to you from my parents' house right now. So this is my bedroom. And I grew up as the youngest of three. So I am 30. I have a brother who is about to turn 32 and a sister who's about to turn 36. So they were 2 and 6 grades above me. Uh, Both my parents are still alive, still together, thankfully. So I grew up in like a very loving family, and kind of the expectation in my family was you go to college, you get your degree, you get your job, you find your spouse, get married, have kids, house, car, etc. And I was kind of on that path. I went to like Catholic school all the way up until Penn State. I went to a school called Kennedy Kendrick Catholic High School, and we had like 500 kids total in the school. So it was a very small school. Um, it was private, but I would not say it was prestigious in any way. Like it closed 2 years after I graduated and combined with another school. Um, and I was really involved when I was in high school. Like my senior year, I was the president of the National Honor Society at my school. I was president of a community service club. I played soccer. I did the play. We did West Side Story that year. That was the only year I did it. And then I worked part-time as like a secretary at a local financial firm for a financial advisor. And I took classes at Villanova University during my senior year. So I was very busy in high school, and then that kind of led into college as well. I went to Penn State University and just hit the ground running, getting involved there as well. I did the Penn State Dance Marathon, which is an effort to raise funds and awareness for the fight against pediatric cancer. They always raise like over $10 million every year, which is awesome. So I was really involved in that. I joined a fraternity. I was a tour guide. I did Habitat for Humanity, and I was part of our homecoming efforts. So yeah, just like super involved in high school, straight into being super involved in college, and specifically at college, that allowed me to meet a lot of people. And that really laid the foundation for what I'm doing today, because I've always loved meeting new people, and I didn't want to leave that in college. Like I wanted to continue doing that after I graduated. And I studied finance, minored in accounting and entrepreneurship, and then worked for Deloitte Consulting for a year and 3 months, and then a tech startup doing sales for a year and 9 months, and then I jumped into this full time. So I know you asked for one thing of my childhood, and I gave you my entire backstory, but that's who I am.
No, I love it, man. Like it's great, great recap for everybody, and even for myself, just to like jog my memory on all of that. But I remember too specifically, like when I know you get this question like all the time, like why are you doing this?
Mm,
Why did you start this project? And it was so interesting to me your answer to that at that time of like you you felt like you were missing something when you entered the real world, right? Like once you got that job with Deloitte and then eventually moving on to that startup company, you didn't have that same semblance of community that you felt when you were in college at Penn State. And definitely it sounds like community that you were able to build in high school as well. And so that was like part of the impetus of what spurred you to go on this journey, right?
yeah, absolutely. I always say, like, in college you would meet people so easily because you would be part of the same club, or you'd sit next to each other in class, and it was just this genuine, you figured out that you had similar interests and you came together. And then afterwards, and I say this all the time, I felt like in the real world it was only people were willing to connect for networking or dating. Like there had to be this defined agenda to why are we spending time together. And I think people miss a lot of value of human connection with having that mindset. And I feel like I can say so now that I've gone and done it 4,200 times. But yeah, I missed that ability to genuinely connect with people, because some of my best friendships came about that way. And yeah, and even more so now, the more I do the project, the more I think I reflect on it and am able to put into words like what my motivation was too. And it just hit me recently that I I believe that every human interaction holds the potential to change your life. And that's like a big reason why I'm so excited to go into every meeting, because I just think it's like unwrapping a gift. You never know where it's going to take you. And it could just be that you feel like a sense of belonging with that person during that time, or they could open up a door, or you could connect with them 4 years later for a podcast episode. So you just never know where it's going to go. And that's what I love about it. And I think that was something that I wasn't able to put into words back then when I started, but it's something I just recently realized is I think that potential lies in every single meeting, which is why I'm so excited to wake up and do it every day.
That's so cool, man. It's like, honestly, like, I think about you quite a bit, man. Like, just from that interaction, I always try to, you hear from me every now and then when I text you
Yeah.
or shoot you a message or like try to connect you with somebody or whatever. You even were lucky enough to meet. I was lucky and grateful that you met my friend Aaron, who lives in Los Angeles, for one of your meetings, and he became one of your 10,000 friends. I've been trying to encourage other people as well to try and meet with you. And you know how it is. Like, some people, they get so they have busy schedules, and if it's not like a huge priority for them, like, they may not necessarily do it. But what you're doing is such a fascinating endeavor. And then you pair that with, like, the content creation side of things, where you've been like documenting this journey on Instagram for the most part. And since then, like, I know you've expanded with creating some stuff on TikTok, and
Yeah.
I see that you've gotten some traction there. But tell me about why you decided on Instagram as the platform of choice for yourself to share these people's stories of who you've met throughout the years.
I think at the time it was just the most dynamic social media platform. Because for me, it's always been about spending that time with that person and then sharing their story as a byproduct. I think that's a misconception that people have sometimes about my project, and even I can get wrapped up in it sometimes. But sometimes people feel like I am meeting with people so that I can grab an interesting story from them and put it out in there. But it's more so I'm meeting with people so that I have a connection with that person, they have a connection with me. We were able to share that time together. And then as a byproduct, I put our picture and their story out to show, here's a positive example of what human connection looks like. And here's what I learned from this person just in sitting down with them for an hour. And Instagram was the best place for me to do that because I could add a picture, I could add the text, and I guess Facebook seemed a little outdated at the time. I feel like we were starting to move away from that. I mean, Humans of New York was really successful there, and sometimes I get compared to him, and I think his work is awesome. But I feel like when I started, it was just Instagram was the place that people were, and it started to seem like people were able to create careers there. You would start to see these travel influencers going and doing these crazy things and having partnerships. And for me, I was like, okay, well, if I can do this project and people are authentically interested in it and they want to follow along with it, then eventually I can leverage that to partner with brands that align with my values. And I can use those funds to continue doing the project. And so it becomes this like cycle of how I'm able to complete this mission. And that has partly held true throughout the journey so far, and partly not as much as I thought it would, which has led me to explore different ways of keeping this going as a career, which has been cool. It's all part of the entrepreneurial journey. But yeah, that's why it's Instagram. And it's funny because when I started, I think it was still only 15 seconds of video, if at all, you could put on there. There were no Instagram stories. It was just like a picture and a caption. And I still think about that sometimes. I'm just really thankful for the way that Instagram is, because when I write, I'll like tag someone's university or I'll tag the nonprofit that they're volunteering with. And so it just becomes that you can link so easily to different things in the story. And I really enjoy that because I think from a writing standpoint, it makes it more colorful for people to be able to go like follow up on the things in there. but I'm in the future planning on expanding into YouTube as well. And I think for the second half of this project, I hope it's a lot more video content. And I think you see that with TikTok and YouTube. It's always been that way. Like, even Instagram with Reels and stuff, that video is king. And I think there's a lot of my story and other people's stories that could be more effectively told using video in the future.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of, connects to what I wanted to talk to you about in terms of just how the pandemic has shaped things. Because do you think that you would have gone the route of sharing, video clips of like the Zoom calls that you're having, like without the pandemic? Because without the pandemic, I'm assuming that you would have probably just kept going the route of, sharing a photo and then writing the nice story that you have about the people that you meet.
Yeah, I don't know. I am definitely thankful for that being a silver lining, because the pandemic leading to me doing Zoom calls, leading to me recording them so that I have a 1-minute clip I can attach to each person's story is a big thing. That was a big change for me, even though it's such a simple thing. But I think with TikTok gaining traction, that may have pushed me into the video world regardless. And because I think back, I'm like, there's so much stuff that I've done in my project that would make great TikTok videos, but I never videoed it. And I'm like, I have all these crazy stories from my project that just never see the light of day because they didn't get videoed. And part of me is also proud of that too, in a way, because I'm like, I was very present for those conversations and I wasn't thinking of anything other than what those people were telling me. And yeah, like I went to this 78-year-old woman's birthday party in Maui, Hawaii. I ended up there because
I remember
it's a very long story, yeah, but I met a flight attendant in LA who gave me a buddy pass, so I was able to fly to Hawaii for free. And I was just DMing random Maui-based accounts being like, hey, I'm this guy trying to meet people. Do you want to be part of my project? And the one girl's account, she was from Philadelphia, so she was like, I don't have time to meet, but you should talk to this dude, George. He's this Grammy award-winning musician in Maui. His family's been here for generations. And so I get in touch with him, and he invites me to this pool party. He's like, yeah, bring your swimsuit. It's going to be awesome. Get there at like 1:30. And I arrive thinking it's going to be this just like party that all these different people come to. And it's a family party of like 30 people. And just like aunts and uncles and cousins celebrating their grandmother's birthday. And George didn't show up until an hour and a half after I got there. And that whole thing, it's one of the best experiences that I've been through on this journey overall, because then I bonded with the family and they just took me in as one of their own, and I stayed with them that whole day. And even after George came and left, I stayed with them for like another hour, and then they drove me back to my hostel. But I was like, I can't document this because this is her birthday and this is like, it's her party. I'm not here to take it and blow it up into this like cool video. So sometimes I'm like, I'm proud that I didn't use her party in any way, and I still have that experience. But at the same time, it would have been really cool to have a visual capture of that story to show people.
Yeah, I can totally empathize with that, because it reminds me of like all the travels that I've done up until COVID, really. And I never, like, I look back, I'm like, hey, I could have probably just become a travel vlogger. I've interviewed a couple travel vloggers on this show, and I'm like, they started at the same time that I started my travels as well. And I look back, and I'm glad I didn't do that, because it allowed me to be present in that moment of being on the road with people. And granted, I was still sharing stuff on social media at that time, but I think if I was constantly like thinking about, trying to, film something and get some sort of moment out of it, it might have taken the authenticity out of the experience. So, and I imagine that's, something, again, that you're touching on, it is like that's what's so cool about your project. Like, I can remember I didn't know what to expect. And I'm sure a lot of people who have met you in person, they didn't know what to expect either. But I remember seeing you pull up in your car at Echo Park, or just like walking. Actually, I remember seeing you walking by yourself trying to find me in the park. And I'm like, okay, this dude is just showing up by himself. Like he's got nobody else with him. It's just him. This is interesting. And so, and it was just a very like, intimate one-on-one conversation that we had, that, when there is, when you're trying to make content sometimes, with the exception of maybe this podcast, it, sometimes that authenticity again gets lost when you're like trying to make something that is, that people will engage with, I guess you could say.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And I think that with the wanting to expand into YouTube, my plan is to do an activity with one person each week and have that be like the designated person for the YouTube video, and we'll do an activity related, like meeting a skydiving instructor and going skydiving with them and having the experience of us going together, but then also capturing the story of how they got into skydiving, what it means to their life. And same with like change out skydiving for whatever other activity. And I want to start doing that, and part of me is like, do I lose that authenticity? But then at the same time, if both parties know we're coming together to do this, to showcase the story, I don't know. I feel like it'll be really cool. And I hope that I stick to it and actually do that, because I want that to be something that I can look back on someday. And I think that it will be, because I think there's trade-offs to it too. Like it might feel maybe a little bit less authentic than just showing up and spending the hour together. But if it's fun for me to create these videos with people, I think it could have potentially a bigger impact on encouraging other people to get out there and meet people. And then I think about it and I'm like, okay, that's worth it then. But yeah, I haven't done it yet. So I have to, and COVID's not over. So I will have to work on that and kind of tweak it to get it to where I want it to go. But it feels like the next thing that is exciting me in the project right now. And I do think the pandemic, as you were touching on earlier, played a part in getting things to this point.
Yeah, it's allowing you to kind of evolve and change as, I mean, just as a human being. Again, you started this when you were 25, right? Or 24
Mm-hmm.
years old, and now you're 30. So you've changed a lot, over this period of time. And so, evolving and doing something different in terms of content, as long as you're like, the message is still the same, the mission is still the same, that's ultimately what matters. I wonder too, like if you're thinking about going that route, maybe there's a way you could just plan out like a shot list of what you want to get first, what you want to get during that experience, so that you're not like so you're not so preoccupied with like, oh, I have to capture every single moment. Like if I have to get this shot, maybe ask them a question here about this for like a soundbite or whatever, and then you can put the camera away and then just have the rest of the experience. That might be a way. That's me just like spitballing off the top of my brain, for you to keep that level of like authenticity, but also like getting to document it as well.
Oh yeah, that's like right in line with what I want to do too, because currently I try to meet 4 people every weekday, Monday through Friday. And when we met back in 2017, my quota or whatever, my schedule was 4 people Monday through Friday in person, each one of those days. And now the way that I think of it, as things have changed, I've really enjoyed having an international representation in the country. Like it's something that I always wanted to get by physically traveling, but in the meantime, video calls are really cool. So I think eventually it will be like 2 days in person, 2 days video calls, and then Fridays will be dedicated to one person for that activity, so we can take our time and we can like get the shots and do whatever. Not that I can't take my time with people normally, but I'm pretty strict about the hour with each person, because I meet people for an hour and then I write about them and I post about them before I start my next meeting. So I meet for an hour, I write and post for an hour, I meet for an hour, write and post. So it's 9 to 5 straight through, 4 meetings and then 4 periods of writing and posting. But I would keep Fridays open for the video content.
Yeah, I know like your process too, like your workflow, so to speak, of like having these meetings. There's a lot of logistics involved, man, especially when you were doing them in person.
Hmm.
Again, we met in person. You were living in Long Beach, right, with a friend
Yes.
at that time. So like you had to drive all the way from Long Beach to East Los Angeles, where Echo Park is. That's that's not a short distance, especially with LA traffic, right? Like you have to plan all these things, and you're meeting people in different places and whatnot. So there's so much involved there logistically, again, with just having to plan all that out,
Hmm.
that you have to consider. And so with doing it's cool to hear that the Zoom calls will continue to be a part of the way that you're moving this project forward.
Yes, yeah, and it definitely has made things easier logistically on me. I've like saved time by not having to drive to the next spot, and then I added time by having a video recording and editing it down to a clip and whatnot. But yeah, super nice to know that rather than having to drive and find parking and make sure I don't get a ticket or get towed, I come here and I sit in this chair and I hop on this computer and I have a chat with someone.
Yeah, no, and it's super cool too to hear, I know that the project has expanded internationally. That was something I think in the conversations that you and I had, I feel like I was always trying to like nudge you like, Rob, you need to go abroad, man.
Hmm.
Like people would love this. Like and your cost of living could be like a lot, lower if you were in like a place like Southeast Asia, or if you went to Eastern Europe, or even like where I ultimately ended up, for a period of time. I remember in that post, you wrote about how I had this desire to go to Colombia. And then here we are 4 years later, I did that.
Hmm.
And I lived there for 5 months, and it's so interesting to see how that played out. But it's so cool that you get to, you know, spend that time with people abroad now. How do you think that how do you think introducing what have you learned from that? How do you think introducing an international flavor, so to speak, to the project has maybe brought new ideas or new perspectives that you didn't necessarily see before, when everyone was mostly either here from the US?
I think it's just there's a greater sense of diversity in the post because I'm meeting people from all different backgrounds. Like it's not uncommon for me to hop to 4 different countries in the world in any given day. Um, like oh man, where was I today? I don't even know. I was in Lebanon today, and then I was in
Wow.
Nashville, and then before that, it wasn't Lisbon, but it was Portugal. So Portugal, Lebanon, the U.S., and then my last meeting had to cancel last minute, but um, he is from Mumbai, so I'm always hopping around to different places, and I like that, and I have way more messages now than I did back when you and I met, and a lot of that is driven by TikTok. So I have the ability, and I don't try to pick and choose anything in particular other than to make sure that my page has people from different races, different countries, different genders and whatnot, so that when people see my project, they feel like, okay, like he's talking to people like me, so I should feel encouraged to reach out as well. And that's pretty much the main priority. And I've gotten that from being able to meet people from different parts of the world. But I've learned so much as well, like about what other countries are protesting about, whether it's Belarus or Chile or Peru, like all these different things, or uh, just because I feel like being in the States, it's so easy to get overwhelmed with the news here, and it almost makes you feel ignorant. I mean, in a way, we are ignorant because every other country is tuned into what we're doing here, and our culture always spills into to their lives and impacts them in a way. But then we have such a hard time knowing what's going on in the other countries. And yeah, it is easy because we get overwhelmed with our own news here. But by me sitting down and talking to other people, I've been able to be educated through them just telling me, like, hey, what's going on in your country outside of COVID? Or even what is quarantine like? Like, South Africa had banned alcohol for a period of time. I don't know if it's still that way, but they banned alcohol to cut down on domestic violence. Or Panama, for example, was on this schedule where only guys could go out of the house on like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or something like that. And they had like a 2 hour time window that was based on their government ID, and then women could go out like Monday, Wednesday, Sunday. And I remember the girl who told me, or was it a girl or a guy? I think it was a guy, and he's like, yeah, it's funny when we're out, like you see all the guys at the grocery store and they're like calling their wives to figure out what they're supposed to get. So that was really interesting. And I think for me personally, it was really cool to have these conversations in a time where probably the only time in recent history where the world was experiencing an event that kind of impacted us similarly all at the same time. And to be able to chat with people in other places and learn what that was like for them was kind of comforting in a way. It definitely made getting through this time easier.
That is really interesting, man. I've had similar experiences too, where I've reached out to friends and people that I've met through travels, and even our team here at Video Husky. Majority of them, actually all of them, with the exception of myself and Justin, the founder of the company, they're all based in the Philippines, and their experience of how they're dealing with this pandemic is totally different than how we're dealing with things here in the United States. And it's humbling, I imagine, too, right? To, for, like you said, for as bad as we might think things are here in the United States, like there are other countries that are suffering through things that I don't think we wouldn't wish upon ourselves.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I don't know, it's cool too, because I don't think that, well, I don't know. I think everything is relative. So the people that I talk to in these countries are still happy and thankful for what they have. And I feel like that's been really cool as well. And I just hope that I get to, again, it's always been in the plans to get out and meet people abroad. And I hope that I have the ability to do that someday, whether it's through a partnership or through, like, I'm trying to get into public speaking now. And whether I do something through that and acquire the funds on my own to be able to support myself to do that, that is something I plan to do in the future.
Yeah, you mentioned there's public speaking. I know that you've done a TED Talk recently, first time. Can you walk me through or tell me like what that process was like? How did you land this opportunity in the first place to do a TED Talk?
Yeah, so it's a TEDx talk, so I feel like it's like I don't even know what the X stands for. I always associate it if it's just university, like TEDx, like TED events at universities, but Emory University, I guess a girl from the TEDx club at Emory University knew about my project and offered me as someone who would make a good speaker for their event. And she reached out to me it might have been back in November, to be honest. And she said, can we do like a video interview, like a speaker interview, to hear more about your story, and then we'll decide if you're someone that we want to speak at the event. And so we had a chat, and that went well. So they chose me to be one of their speakers, and it was kind of, once, it was always in my mind, and then once the new year hit, once January hit, because the actual event is April 17th, 2021. And once the new year hit, I was like, okay, I have to dedicate a lot of time to doing this talk because it feels like a really big opportunity and I want to make the most of it. So I read a book it's called Talk Like TED. I have it back on my bookshelf back there, by this guy Carmine Gallo. And it was cool. It was really insightful as to like how to make a good TED Talk. And I watched a ton of other people's talks and probably in the end still did whatever style I was going to end up with anyways. But for me, there was a ton of imposter syndrome of everyone else's talks is so good and mine, I know that I have good information, but felt like I couldn't mine it out and put it in a way that was going to connect with people. And it took me a while to really nail down what I wanted to say. And then I was practicing like 3 times a night, 2 or 3 times a night for the last month, where I didn't want to memorize it, but I just wanted to know what I wanted to say. so that when I said it, like I felt like I had comfort with it. And that's kind of what the process was like for me. The first talk that I wrote out, the talk ended up being nothing like that. And then I ultimately was like, what do I tell people when I talk to them in these meetings? Sometimes when I talk to people, whether it's on podcasts or just in the particular meetings, I feel like I'll be discussing the value of human connection and I'll see a light bulb go off in their head. And I was like, I just need to say that because that's what I think is the value of meeting people anyways. And so I called my talk the untapped value of human connection. And in it, I discussed what I think is the layers of value that you get from just setting a goal for yourself to meet people. And the layers were like an increased sense of belonging, an exchange of knowledge, and an opening of doors for your future. And I just kind of went through examples of how the people I met led those things to play out in my life.
Very cool, man. Yeah, I imagine too, like it's different in the sense that you didn't get to speak in front of people, like an audience, right, because of COVID, but still the preparation is very, it can be very taxing too. You're trying to figure out how, like you said, you're trying to figure out what to say, how to say it, and it sounds like you figured that it's very similar to just what you're doing here on like my podcast or other podcasts that you've been on, just kind of expressing the same message that you've been expressing to other people, in those types of contexts. I kind of want to shift gears here a little bit in terms of the content creation side of things for yourself on a personal level. We touched on how you've started, creating stuff on TikTok as well. I like it. I mean, I've seen some of the stuff that you've made. Can you kind of walk me through like how it is that you're coming up with like different ideas of what to create on TikTok, and then the process of actually creating it and then publishing it?
Yeah, my older brother was the one who really pushed me to be more active on TikTok. And I need to get back to being more active there still, but in the very early days, he was kind of helping me with stuff. So he would repurpose my stories and it would just be like the image of the person. And then on like every beat of the song, a new fact of them would come up. And we were doing that for a bit. And then I know he wanted to explore with some trends and stuff, but I myself am not really big into like the whole idea of trends on TikTok. It kind of, for me, it feels like the opposite of that authenticity that we talked about earlier. So I've done some with my brother because he's like, just do it. Like, it's good for you to hop on these things and get the message out about your project. But I think where I really felt was just kind of, or where I found my voice and I'm still trying to find my voice, is just sharing like the behind the scenes of my project, like my story of going from Deloitte to doing this project that seems like a very typical millennial move, like leaves the high paying corporate job to like pursue a dream, and what that experience has been like, and trying to showcase the experience of meeting people. And two of my best videos are just me being like, hey, I want to meet you. I've been doing this project for the last 5 years and I've learned a lot. Do you want to be one of the people? Like, message me on Instagram if you're down to meet. And from those two videos alone, I've probably had over 2,000 people message me in the last.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. I every day I'll open up and I'll have like 10 new messages of people being like, hey, I found you on TikTok. And yeah, it's crazy. TikTok is a wild, wild world. I feel like there are so many people from my project who started posting there, and yeah, there's like, just to showcase how quick people can grow there. I feel like there's at least like 6 people that I've met from my project who all have over 1 million followers on TikTok.
Wow.
Yeah, not to be like, I know people with big followings, but to be like, these people were people that I met through my project who just started posting there and they just took off. And it's cool because if you look on Instagram, they're still relatively small, but on TikTok, there are these huge accounts and the engagement over there is real. It doesn't make sense in my mind, but I think the algorithm is so good that whereas Instagram, you can have a large following and low engagement, TikTok, it just pushes the stuff to the people that want to see it. Like, it pushes my videos to the type of people who are going to go to Instagram and send a message. And I think that's a really cool part of their platform.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I haven't I haven't turned to the I'm gonna call it the dark side yet
Mhm.
of TikTok, because I'm kind of worried. Well, I'm not worried, but I know myself to be like, if I signed up for a TikTok account and actually had it on my phone, like I would spend way more time than I should be spending, like just scrolling through the feed. Because, like you said, I've heard from other friends too who are using it, and other creators who've been on this podcast about like how good the algorithm is
Mhm.
in terms of just serving content to people, which, if you're a creator, it enables these opportunities for yourself to like grow an audience very quickly. But at the same time, I think it's really cool. You What you're doing is still ultimately, I think, the way that everybody has to go. Is like, it's a long journey,
Mhm.
it's a long slog. Like, it's not, you can't have you don't you can't it's not worth it to necessarily be, in my opinion, like an overnight success. Like, there's so many things I imagine that you've learned along the way in terms of just like growing your platform very slowly. Can you go back and like detail some of like the early days of when you started just sharing stuff on your Instagram account, and also just how, like, the moments that you started to notice it take off in terms of like more people starting to follow you and be engaged with the project?
Yeah. I started my account in January of 2016. I met the first person for my project November of 2015. And I met 8 people before I posted anything to Instagram. The goal was always to post on Instagram, and I took pictures with the first 8 people. I wrote all of my notes on them. But once I met 8 people, I was like, okay, I'm going to commit to this. Because I didn't want to put something out there publicly that I wasn't going to actually commit to. And when I decided that, I started posting in late January, and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell any of my friends. And I still to this day have not really been someone who, like, if you meet me out at a party, I probably won't tell you what I do unless you ask. I don't know why. It's just kind of the way that I am, because there's a lot of questions that come with it. But I was just doing it because I was having fun with it. And the only people I would tell were the people that I was asking to be part of the project. And I literally Googled Philadelphia artists, and there was a site that had different painters paint work. And I was like, oh, this picture looks cool. I'll shoot that guy an email, or I'll shoot that girl an email. And that was how I got in touch with people early on. And then random people would like a photo for the hashtag, or they would follow me for the hashtag. And I would message them and be like, hey, thanks for checking out my project. This is what I'm doing. I would love for you to be part of it. And then as I met people, they started to introduce me to their friends, and it really picked up on word of mouth. And I, at the time, lived in the Northern Liberties neighborhood of Philadelphia. And that was like a 10-minute bike ride from Temple University. I met a couple of students there, and then they started to tell their friends. And then by the first semester that school was back in session, I was like this guy at Temple University that was always meeting these people, even though I went to Penn State. Like, I got asked to come on this show in Philadelphia, and the guy introduced me, and he's like, all right, we have Temple University graduate Rob Lawless here. And I was like, no, dude, I'm from Penn State. But yeah, it spread through word of mouth. And by May of 2016, because I had gotten connected to different people through my project, one of those people was a writer for this publication called the Philadelphia Citizen. He wrote an article on me, and it kind of it like blew up in the sense that it had like 1,000 likes on Facebook. But at that time, for this just new concept of me not telling people, a lot of people heard about it that day. And then along the way, it was just a mix of word of mouth and press. And the press started to get bigger throughout the years. And I guess some of the people who reached out to me were bigger in terms of their followings. So as examples, press-wise, the very first time I got to LA, which was 2017, that summer Time Out Los Angeles wrote an article on me, and people found me that way. And the following summer, Ryan Seacrest had me on his radio show. That was 2018. In 2019, the Kelly Clarkson show had me on as a guest. which was really cool. The whole audience was made up of people that I'd met. And then last summer, I was on the Today Show with Hoda and Jenna virtually. And then about a month ago, I was back on Ryan Seacrest's radio show with him. So that was cool. So all that stuff has been really cool. And I actually, in 2019 as well, right before the Kelly Clarkson thing, Now This did a piece on me. Daily Mail did a piece on me. A Plus, which is Ashton Kutcher's media company, they did a piece on me. I was living like in Hoboken, so I was close to New York City in that time. And in that time, it was like every week, like CBS New York, ABC World News Now. Now this, I was like calling into radio stations in Chicago and whatnot, or not radio stations, television stations, doing like virtual interviews with them. So the press always picked up, and from the people side, in 2018, I got connected with Yes Theory. I met one of the guys, Matt, who is one of the three guys or I guess he's one of four guys that started Yes Theory, but one of the three who kind of like was known with them. And they posted about me one time on an Instagram story that led to a ton of people finding out about me. I still meet people virtually today from different parts of the world who've been following me since 2018 because of them. Special Books by Special Kids is a really awesome account. This guy, Chris Ulmer, and his girlfriend run it, and he interviews individuals with rare diagnoses from around the country. He's been a huge supporter of my project. So him talking about it from time to time has been really good. Then, like last year, from TikTok, Zach King reached out to me. He does like magic and illusion videos on TikTok. So yeah, he's very popular there. So I went out to Los Angeles and I went lobster diving with him and his friend Aaron, which was probably one of the most memorable experiences of the project. And while I was in town, I met Drew Scott from the Property Brothers and his wife, because he had heard about me through his wife the year, or I guess 6 months earlier, in February of 2020. And he reached out to me. And yeah, so that has kind of happened as well. And it just feels like I just put my head down and I continue meeting people. And every once in a while, these bigger opportunities pop up along the way. And then like you introduced me to Cal Fussman. That was a cool opportunity as well. And I had a lot of people find me through the podcast I did with him.
That's very cool, man. I'm first of all, I feel honored that I was able to help you get some additional attention for the project, but it's really fascinating to hear that most of this traction that you've gotten for yourself is just organic, and you never really went out of your way to actively promote yourself. Like the opportunities with like Kelly Clarkson and Ryan Seacrest and the Today Show, they just, the producers of those shows just heard of you from somebody else who told somebody else and told somebody else, and that's essentially how you ended up on those shows, right?
Yes. Yeah, they all have reached out to me, and even like the most recent Ryan Seacrest thing is because a girl that I had met with was in a clubhouse room talking about my project, and one of the other people in that room was a producer for his show, and was like, that's such a cool idea. I want to have him on the show. So he goes back to his producers, and they were like, oh yeah, we've already had him on the show, but see if he wants to come on again. So that was how that happened.
Yeah, no. And then even like the Cal Fussman thing, right? Like that was cool that you were able to be a guest on his podcast. And it's funny because I occasionally like will shoot Cal and his manager Kevin like an email like, hey, I think you should meet this person. I just like doing that stuff. It's fun for me. And so it was cool again to hear. It's cool to hear you say that has been able to generate some awareness and attention around the project for yourself. So I know that we're coming up here towards the end of this conversation. One of the last things that I do want to ask you about is, how have you changed since we first met? Like, and what new ideas, what new concepts, what new things have you learned in the time that has passed since we met, about human beings in general and people, and even about yourself? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. I think I am a much more mature and aware person. Not that I wasn't before, but I just feel like I have seen society from so many different angles that I now take all of that into account. So I'll try to explain a little bit, but thematically, I always say the biggest thing I've learned from my project is that no one really knows what they're doing. Everyone is just doing the best they can with the resources that they have. And it's that a lot people have a lot of depth to them because I talk to people for an hour at a time. My mind is kind of framing people in that way whenever I interact with them. I think the norm is for people to just think of people surface level, like as they are in that moment, because that's all they see them, and they don't think about the fact that beyond the fact that we're doing a podcast together, like you probably have 10 other things that you have on your to-do list that you're thinking about getting done. And then outside of the podcast, like I'm flying to actually back to Long Beach tomorrow to be with my friend and like working on all these different things behind the scenes with the project. So I think I just think about people with that depth more often now. And yeah, I understand that there's so many people have been through such crazy things that it's just so often I'm 30, my parents are still alive, still together. I have met so many people through my project who are younger than me, who've lost parents or who've lost siblings. And I think that's one of the most striking things for me is when we're young, I think we assume that we're always going to have our loved ones with us, and we just don't think about it because it's sad to do that. But when I've interacted with some of these other people, like in the last 2 months alone, I met two girls. One was 26 and has lost both of her parents already. One was 22 and lost both of her parents already. And I'm like, I can't imagine the maturity that you get through that, or like the growing up that you have to do when at such a young age these like figures in your life are taken away from you. So I'm just more aware of that, and I think that impacts what I'm grateful for and what I place value in. And I've gone through the project multiple times having like a few $100s to my name, and that could be stressful, but I'm able to put that into context of like, okay, this is a financial position that I put myself in because I'm chasing a dream. It's not a necessity, and it's also not like my mom or dad just passed away. Like, this is something that I can change by going out and getting a job. You can't bring someone back. So I think about that stuff more. And yeah, being aware of like the fact that people have had to drop out of college, not because they're not motivated or they're not smart, but because their parents couldn't afford rent on their own, and they had to go home and get a job to help contribute to their parents having a place to stay. Like, those things I never would have thought about before the project, but it's now something that I understand. And I don't think people talk about it that often because it's just not like a thing that I think people want to talk about in their everyday life. But fortunately, with me and my conversations, I'm able to have these really, as you said, intimate one-on-one talks with people. And it's allowed me to grow in that awareness. And I've also, I think, become a lot more confident in myself. I think that I've always had a mix of naivety and confidence, and I hope that that is what will contribute to this succeeding. But I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, okay, I've done 4,200 hours without, like, I had a partnership with WeWork. That was awesome. That was the biggest thing that I had. It was a 9-month partnership. But for the most part, like, I haven't really had like strong financial support. It's always been doing things from a shoestring budget. And I'm like, okay, if I've put 4,200 hours of meeting time alone, and there's probably an additional 4,200 hours of like writing, planning, preparing, if I put all that time into this when I'm not getting paid anything to do it, I'm in a good position, and I know what it's like to put in the work and kind of grind it out. And so I feel like all of these people like Gary V who talk about the long road and stuff and give their business advice, I feel like I'm living it and kind of earning my stripes in a way. And that has made me more confident because I'm like, okay, I know I'm going to wake up and do this. I've proven to myself that I have the discipline. Uh, so yeah, that has come with it as well. And I think just in general, as I've gone down the path, I've explored different things. Like, if you and I talked last year or 2 years ago, I wouldn't be talking about the YouTube idea or the public speaking as much. And those are just things that come with experience along the way, and different doors that you just like open and peeked in along the journey. And you're like, oh, okay, this looks good. I think I'm going to go down this route more. And I think that's part of the fun of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. I think also too, one thing that maybe for me, like having had the experience of being in one of those 1 hour meetups with you is um just how good of a listener you are as well, man. Like it amazes me, like you take no notes in these conversations. You have excellent memory and you're able to write in pretty vivid detail a lot of the key takeaways from each conversation that you have with these people. And I wonder if that's something that you've noticed in yourself too, is like how much you've improved as a listener by just doing this project for the last 6 years.
Yes, that, yeah, that's a good one I didn't even think about, but that is true. I think both in being able to internalize people's stories and in being or like creating a comfortable environment for people, I think and it's hard to like explain that really, but like I think that's a skill that I have really built through the years of like, if someone's telling me something really sad or tragic about their life and it like they start to get emotional about it, I've learned how to sit with that and to give them that space, as opposed to like feeling awkward or feeling like I had to fix the situation in their life or something like that. I've learned how to just sit and be a good listener for them. And I've had people be like, "Oh, I feel like I just went to a therapist," and I'm like, "Cool, like I'm happy that you had a good time or you got that off your chest." But I think there's a skill in that of being able to do that effectively with people. And I obviously have no formal training in it, but I do think I've gotten better at that as well.
Well, man, Rob, it was great to have you here for this conversation. Good to see you again and just catch up. And how long are you going to be in LA, man? Are you going to be there for a couple months or what?
Just for a month. I had like a flight credit that I had to use, so I am just going to go to my friend's and just sit myself at his house and meet people virtually there, as opposed to being here. So yeah, I'll be there for a month, but I'm thinking of maybe going back at like some point in the second half of the year. So I have to talk to my friends or just see like how the dust settles in the world. So we'll see.
Gotcha, man. Yeah, if you're out there late summer or whatnot, I think that's probably when I might start venturing out into the world again, this pandemic situation that we have. But it'd be great to like connect with you again in person.
Yeah.
You know, just chop it up and whatnot if you have the time and stuff. But obviously, it's great to just hear where you're at in the journey and hopefully, like with what we're doing here on the podcast, expose some new people to what you're doing. And you know, before we leave here, why don't you just let everybody know where they can find you and also where they can reach out to you if they want to become one of your 10,000 friends.
Yeah, they can. So my project is called Rob's 10K Friends, and that's the handle on Instagram. It's the handle on TikTok. And I have a website, robs10kfriends.com. But if people want to know about the project or want to follow it, I would go Instagram first if they want the behind the scenes, TikTok. And the best way to get in touch is just to message me, to be part of the project, to message me on Instagram or pretty much for any reason. It might take me a little bit to get back because I do get a lot of messages, but I am pretty good if people follow up, like, and they don't mind following up and sending those extra messages. I will see that and eventually get back to them. So yeah, and anyone who hears this who is inspired to meet, I would be happy to meet with them. It'd be a pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Rob.
Of course, man. Thank you so much for having me. And as always, thank you for the continued support throughout the years. I appreciate it.
Thanks again to Rob Lawless for joining me on this episode of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky. A few quick things for all of you before you go. First, if you enjoyed this show, share it with a friend, share it with someone who you think would find the content valuable, send it to them in a text message, or share it with them on Instagram or wherever. Just send a link over to someone who you think would find this content valuable. It really helps us spread the word of what we're doing. Second, you can find the show notes for this episode and previous ones over at www.videocraftshow.com. And third, if you are a content creator that struggles to organize and script your ideas, we have got a resource for you. Get a copy of our free script template. Using it can help you structure your videos and save you hours of time from filming in the process. To download it, all you have to do is go to videocraftshow.com, or if you're watching here on YouTube, find the link in the description below and just subscribe to our email list. It'll get delivered straight to your inbox right after you sign up. Also, if you are enjoying the show, make sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. We're always trying to make the show better for listeners and viewers like you. So feedback, both good and bad, helps us to improve. And finally, if you're watching the show on YouTube, make sure to hit the like button, please. It helps us with the YouTube algorithm and gets the show in front of more creators just like you. Just like sharing. Sharing is caring. So again, reminder, share the show if you are enjoying it. Leave us a comment too. We read all of them. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Thank you to everyone who helps make this show possible. My producer, Nikki Vicente, editor, Vinny Luterio, and Paulo Lopez on graphics, and the rest of the crew over at Video Husky. If you want your videos edited to look just like this, then visit videohusky.com to learn more. I'll see you next week on another episode of the Video Craft Show presented by Video Husky.